Armour of God, 1986, the film that almost cost Sing Lung aka Jackie Chan his life, but ended up being one of his most famous roles. Let's have a closer look at how it was made, but also break down the opening and the ending to see how they were edited. Where possible, I'll warn you about the spoilers. Here we go. Mid-1980s was the busiest period in Jackie's life, often shooting 2 films at once. His 1985 output consisted of 5 films. By the summer of that year, his latest productions, The Protector and Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Stars, just hit the cinemas in Asia. 2 additional titles, Heart of a Dragon and the famous police story, were in post-production, awaiting their release in September and December respectively. Jackie was riding an all-time high wave of success. Jackie, being a massive fan of Spielberg, together with Edward Tam, his screenwriter, came up with an idea of making kind of a homage to Raiders of the Lost Ark, which eventually became Armour of God. According to Edward Tam, originally the story revolved around the conflict between Catholic and Islamic people, but eventually they scrapped the idea and swapped it for an unnamed ancient cult to avoid trouble with such a sensitive topic. Jackie was also keen to shoot abroad after the experience on Wheels on Meals, which allowed them a bit more freedom when compared to shooting in overcrowded Hong Kong. With a script ready or probably an outline, which was more of a norm back in those days, Golden Harvest decided to put Eric Tsang in the director's chair. That decision was probably based on the fact that Eric was behind a very successful series called Aces Go Places, aka Mad Mission, made for Cinema City. These films were set in modern times and helped the Hong Kong cinema to transition from the classic kung fu flicks into more modern, current action cinema which wasn't based only around fights. To further maximize the appeal, a stellar cast was assembled for the film. Alan Tam, a canto pop star turned actor, Lola Forner, Miss Spain and Miss Europe of 1980, who was with Jackie in Wheels on Meals, Rosamund Kwan, who was with Chow Yun-fat in The Headhunter, rising star in Hong Kong cinema, and also surprisingly, Cynthia Rothrock, who at the time was just starting in the industry, was originally cast to be in this film. With everything lined up, the production set wheels in motion in the late August, early September 1985, with the principal photography starting in Zagreb, Croatia, back then known as Yugoslavia. Also, there was a notable change with Jackie's appearance. The art director, Yi Chung-man, wanted him to try a new look, short hair. He agreed to do it, but they didn't have a professional stylist on the set, so Yi Chung-man had to cut it himself. When he was done, Jackie looked in the mirror and he thought he looked absolutely hideous. But that's how they shot the first few scenes. There were dialogue scenes between Jackie, Alan Tam and Božidar Smijanik, who played the Count. They also shot scenes with Lola Forner, which were to take place later in the film, but were ultimately cut from the final version. A few days later, the crew moved to Samobor Castle, about 30-minute drive from Zagreb, to shoot the film's opening. Halfway through, Jackie and Willie Chan had to briefly fly to Japan to promote the upcoming release of Heart of a Dragon. The journey back took them about 23 hours, and after that Jackie had to go to a production meeting until 4 AM. After 3 hours of sleep, Jackie turned up to the castle set on 7th of September to continue filming the opening scene. After shooting the beer sequence, they prepared a shot in which Jackie was supposed to jump from a 15 feet tall castle wall onto a tree onto another wall. It was a quick shot, everyone knows the story, it was a routine stunt for them, so no one bothered to prepare any kind of protection, wires, mats, nothing. The first take, or the first couple of takes as Jackie remembers in his newest book, went well and Eric Tsang was ready to move on, but Jackie wanted to perfect it. He wanted to perfect the move and land on the castle wall legs first, so he could then stand up and take it from there. And that's when he ran out of luck. On the next attempt, Jackie slipped from the tree and plummeted 15 feet down to the ground, desperately trying to hold on to something to slow down his fall. According to the man himself, it was actually raining the night before and leaves still had some water on them. The first couple of jumps shook the water from the leaves onto the branches, and that's what made it slippy. He landed partially sideways using the extended arm to protect his head, but unfortunately his head still hit a rock. Also, his dad was on the set that day, so I can't imagine how it must have felt for him. Jackie woke up and you all must have heard how he was bleeding from the ear. You've seen the rushes, you know the whole story. Everyone was terrified that he was about to die. They were also shooting in the middle of nowhere, so the production team had to actually carry him down the mountain, then take him to the hospital in a jeep. On the way there, one of the production team apparently sat next to him and kept on hitting him quite hard because they were petrified that he will fall asleep and die. That's how bad it was. They ended up going to 2 hospitals and an emergency surgery had to be performed immediately to extract a piece of bone that went inside his skull and could have damaged his brain. Jackie was given an anesthetic and fell asleep. The operation lasted a few hours, and after he finally woke up, they broke the good news to him. They managed to locate a Swiss doctor who was an expert in brain surgery, who just happened to be in Yugoslavia giving a lecture at a university. After the surgery, they kept him for an observation, and 2 weeks later, he went to Paris to see an American doctor for another 10 days. Jackie being Jackie, he was back on the set in Yugoslavia a few days after he left the hospital in Paris. The aim for them was not to hold back the production too long. It cost money, they had to keep 100-odd people working. So they tried various ways of blocking the camera to hide half of his face. But after a few days they realized that wasn't working at all, and they all packed up and went back to Hong Kong. The production resumed a few months later in Hong Kong, but only after his hair grew back and he was fit enough to undertake a normal shooting schedule. By this point, Eric Tsang was already scheduled to direct Lucky Stars Go Places, so Jackie had to take over the directing duties. Clyde Gentry III also suggests in his book Inside the Dragon that Tsang actually got sacked from the production after he spent 70% of the budget on a third of the film. I found no confirmation of that elsewhere. I don't know if that's true. There was also a rumor among the fans that apparently Eric shot the remainder of the film with Alan Tam as the main character in case Jackie didn't make it, but that theory seems a bit wild. We know for a fact that they shot a few scenes whilst Jackie was recovering, and one of the fruits of that is the fashion model massacre scene, which is quite violent for a Jackie film. Anything that was shot with Jackie in the original haircut, minus the opening sequence, had to be scrapped completely to avoid obvious continuity issues, and they focused on trying to salvage that first opening sequence since it was mostly done. That brings me to my favorite bit, editing. It's quite a common practice that editors are on the set cutting the scenes as the production goes. Armour of God was of course shot on film, so an assistant on the set would mark Jackie's favorite takes and they would go to so-called print, which basically means they were selected to be developed and processed. I imagine that on a Jackie scene, anytime there was less than 10 takes, they would process them all, but in cases where Jackie racked up 50 plus, 100 plus or more takes, he would generally have an idea of a shortlist and only those takes would get printed. These would then get passed over to his editor, in this case Peter Chong, who worked with Jackie since The Young Master. Most films are not shot in the chronological order, so the editor would have assembled each scene as they came and then put them on the back burner. According to Peter, pretty much every night after Jackie wrapped on the set, he would come to his suite and watch the sequences he edited and tweak them, and would not leave until he was satisfied. Once the shooting was complete, Peter would then assemble all the scenes in the correct order, make further changes, then screen the assembly cut to Jackie. Then they would edit for another couple of weeks until they were satisfied, send the picture log to the DAB to make dialogue, music and effects, and then screen the film to the producers and test audiences. It was very director driven back in Hong Kong that day, so the producers didn't see it until that stage. It's worth noting that contrary to Jackie's preferred 2:35 aspect ratio, this film is presented in 1:85. This is because the original director, Eric Tsang, shot all of his sequences in full frame Academy ratio to then be matted to his preferred 1:85. That wouldn't look good further cropped to widescreen 2:35, so a decision was made to continue filming the same way, and it became the only Jackie directed film to be shot in this ratio. Fun fact, there's at least one VHS version that was released as an open matte, which basically means the top and the bottom of the picture were not masked and reveal the things that were not meant to be seen by the audience. Right, so let's break down the opening scene and see how they managed to salvage it after Jackie's accident. When it comes to shooting action, Jackie choreographs and films in chronological order, so luckily everything until the retrieval of the sword was shot by him. Possibly these two inserts were shot at a later date, just to bring in a bit more detail to the sequence. Rest of it all shot with Jackie. He beautifully comes down the tower with 2 flips and briefly fights the natives, all choreographed and performed by Jackie and his stunt team. At the end of it, he jumps over the pot, and from this point, the production team and the editor Peter Chong had to get a bit creative. Notice the style of all of the previous shots. Even though it's more cutty than your usual Jackie sequence, his face is envisioned most of the time. From this point onwards, the style of shooting changes. Most of the bridging shots that were captured after the accident with a double have his face obscured, and the editing is a bit choppier. It's actually done quite well, so I never noticed any problems with it, but it's only after I had a closer look then I started noticing little stitches here and there. I think whatever was supposed to happen here was cut, and instead we cut to a wide low angle shot of a double jumping the gap between the walls. The continuity between these shots doesn't work, but because there's a rhythm and a similar faster paced editing style that was established in the sequence preceding it, it does not jar too much. Immediately after the low wide angle jump, we go to a matching shot with the double climbing the wall. Again, very short, but it does help to establish the geography of the place and blends nicely into the sequence. This was shot to bridge us to the next segment that was actually the last one that Jackie shot, the jump that nearly killed him. Quick cutaway of the natives throwing spears to ease the cut and establish that Jackie's under fire, and we roll the pre-accident take beautifully captured from 2 cameras. Beyond that wall, there's a 100-foot drop, so it was never a plan for him to slip and land the way he does. But Peter, the editor, being stuck with such a take, spliced in another bridging shot, showing him landing behind the wall. This time, it's obvious in HD that's not Jackie. It's actually quite clever what they did, because they could have easily run everything that they shot with Jackie and then splice in a section that they shot with a double, but then it would feel quite disjointed. It's quite an amazing feat how Peter managed to utilize those leftover shots to make it feel more organic and evenly spread Jackie's presence throughout. This shot feels a bit funny. Jackie reacts as if he was just discovered, and then he runs out of the frame. Then in the next shot he does a backflip. Jackie in the close-up, wide shot we don't know, but the way it's edited it's quite similar to the backflips in the very opening, so it was probably part of the original sequence shot with Jackie. Then a little shot with a double to bridge the gap and help us with the newly made up geography of this chase, and then we cut to a sequence with Jackie and a fake beer. Notice how he acts as if he was just cornered again. Looking at all the genuine shots of Jackie and how he reacts in them, I think we can quite confidently say that they were part of a bigger cat and mouse kind of a scene that followed the pot scene, and in which Jackie desperately tried to hide within the castle walls, only to be discovered time and time again. That sequence would have culminated in this little scene, where he's forced to use one of his gadgets, which is the beer can. In an interview with Yahoo in 2017, Jackie mentioned that a sequence that they shot before the accident was this one. According to him, after the first attempt of the tree jump, they actually went back and did a few more takes of him opening the beer. Notice how they established the treetop in the background of the shot, and how Jackie looks at it before jumping. It's also the last fully complete section with him, and knowing he shoots action in chronological order, it could be quite possible that the original sequence was planned to look something like this. Of course, you can see the continuity doesn't match as he jumps out of the window and then in the next shot he's launching from a castle wall. However, because we cut from the medium shot to a medium close-up of the jump, it doesn't really jar. There was also an alternate angle from the very bottom of the tree, so they had it at their disposal to make the sequence work if it went to plan. The next section, starting with the jump, was shot almost entirely with a stand-in, and even though he jumps out of the window, which is larger than in the previous shot, and there is no tree in front of it, it sells the continuity quite well. A quick shot of the natives, and then we cut to a wide shot of actual Jackie, followed by a very quick shot of him starting to climb. From here onwards, the whole sequence was shot whilst Jackie was recovering in hospital. They still didn't know if he will recover or what will happen to the film, but presumably, whilst they still had access to the location, they shot an end to the scene. Jackie's character jumps, and with this shot we jump to a new location, and this cut is done to suggest it's just outside of the castle. But if you look at the extreme wide shot later in the sequence, the castle is definitely missing from the top of the hill. Once he recovered a couple of months later, they shot this insert where you can see his hair being long again. This shot was cleverly put as the first shot of Jackie sliding, so he's present in the sequence, and then it joins up with the rest of the scene that was shot while he was bedridden. The inserts were probably shot somewhere else. You can see the grass being longer and greener on Jackie's shots. It was done for the logistical reasons. It wouldn't make sense for the crew to come back to the same locations in Yugoslavia to get only a few shots, so they probably found a hill somewhere where they just filmed a few close-ups of Jackie and they plunked it in the sequence. It works very well, cut the costs and time significantly, so win-win. Then we come back to him for the end of this sequence, and from here onwards we are back with JC for good. Okay, let's jump to the end of the film and examine the famous balloon sequence. It wasn't safe nor wise for the balloon to come so close near the mountain, because a single draft of wind could push it forward and it would tear, killing all the passengers, so this stunt had to be accomplished in sections. The jump from the edge was executed most likely using an inflatable airbag placed just below the frame. Some sources say they used a wire rig, but a normal basic one used in Hong Kong at the time could result in Jackie swinging and slamming against the rocks. However, at the time there was a system invented by an American stunt coordinator, Vic Armstrong, called a fan descender, which basically was an advanced wire rig which allowed for a controlled jump that gradually gets slowed down. But I highly doubt it was available to a much cheaper production like this one. There was also no efficient wire erasing technique back then, so they wouldn't be able to hide all the wires, especially in the closer shot. I would say it's most likely an airbag that Jackie just belly flops onto. All the aerial footage was shot near Paris, where they captured all these lovely shots of the balloon, as well as the key link in the sequence, Jackie mid-air with the balloon in the same shot. For this one, Jackie jumped out of the plane wearing a hidden parachute along with a trailing cameraman to catch his descent and the balloon in the same shot. The plan was to get as close to the balloon as possible without hitting it, out of fear that he could have torn a hole in it. The wide shot of him getting closer to the balloon was probably achieved using an experienced skydiver who went past the balloon behind it, and because of the forced perspective, it gives an illusion that they are in one line, but that's just my speculation. For the shot of Jackie landing on top of the balloon, they inflated it on the ground and he jumped on it a few times from a wooden board mounted on top of a construction crane. In the unmatted VHS version, which I mentioned earlier, you can actually see a treetop in one of the shots. And then for the final shot, the balloon ascended in the air with Jackie on top of it, and the helicopter filmed him rappelling from the top into the basket. So, 4 separate shots just to make that one final sequence. Each of them more dangerous than the previous one, just so Jackie could come back in glory like a rising phoenix from the ashes. The film was completed in the late summer of 1986, and for the first time ever it was actually released in Japan first instead of Hong Kong on 16th of August to capitalize on a busy movie-going season, and a month later it was released in Taiwan. His home audience didn't see the film until a few months later. It was released in Hong Kong on 21st of January 1987 during the Chinese New Year, because it was already quite an established tradition that a new Jackie Chan film was released then. Imagine being in those times in the 80s, where after the loss of Bruce Lee a decade earlier, Jackie rose to stardom, was absolute #1 throughout the 80s. Then this nearly fatal accident must have briefly put everything on hold, with people wondering, would that be another case of a tragic loss of an action star? Personally, I think if it wasn't for that massive spanner in the works, Jackie, riding on this wave of success, feeling almost invincible, would have probably gotten more and more reckless and eventually get himself seriously injured or even killed. This accident forced him to stop, reassess, rethink, and his comeback is a real testament to his dedication and skill, both as a director but also as a performer. Thanks guys, and see you next time.